They say silence is peaceful. But no one tells you that silence can also scream. There was a day not too long ago when I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the wind stir the leaves on the ground. The world outside was moving. Children's laughter from a few houses down. A delivery truck rolling by. The neighbor's dog barking again. Life happening. But inside me, there was a stillness so heavy it felt like grief wearing a mask. That morning, I realized something. I hadn't spoken to another person in 3 days. Not a word. Not a text. Not a voice. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards reminding me that time hadn't stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stared at the steam rising from my cup and thought, so this is what being forgotten feels like. You see, loneliness doesn't always hit you like a lightning bolt. Sometimes, it's slow and quiet. It creeps in through the cracks of a busy world, until one day, you look around and realize, you're surrounded by people, but connected to none. This is the story of 5 moments, small, quiet, and deeply human, that made me realize I was truly, utterly alone. But in sharing them, maybe, just maybe, we'll remember we're not. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. The house would smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies. My husband, Richard, always insisted on making the mashed potatoes himself, said no one else could get the butter ratio just right. The grandkids would run through the kitchen, laughing, sneaking cookies before dinner, while I'd pretend not to notice. But that year, everything was different. I had cleaned the silverware, ironed the old tablecloth with the embroidered leaves, and even found the centerpiece I made back in '92. I set the table for 7, though I already knew only 2 would come. One of them called that morning to say he and his wife had caught a last-minute flight to her parents' place. Another left a voicemail, promising they'd stop by next weekend. The others didn't call at all. But I still set the table for 7. I poured cider into all the glasses. I laid out all the plates. And when I sat down, facing the seat Richard used to claim with that crooked smile of his, I felt a kind of ache that words can't reach. I looked across the table and saw chairs that once held stories, jokes, old arguments, birthday candles. Now, they were just chairs. Still. Silent. Empty. I waited 15 minutes before taking my first bite. Not because the food wasn't ready, but because part of me still hoped someone might knock on the door. That maybe they changed their mind. That maybe they remembered. But no one did. And in that quiet, with a full table and an empty house, I understood something: loneliness isn't always about being alone. Sometimes, it's about being forgotten in a room built for remembering. That Thanksgiving, the empty chair didn't just belong to Richard. It belonged to every moment I had once shared, now echoing back at me like a memory too loud to ignore. My birthday falls in early spring. The kind of day when the air still holds a chill, but the sun warms your skin just enough to make you believe winter is finally letting go. For years, I used to wake up to the same 3 voices. Richard's, low and gentle, whispering a happy birthday, sweetheart, as he placed a kiss on my forehead. Then my daughter's, cheerful, too loud for 7 a.m., telling me she'd call back after the kids got off to school. And finally, my son's, always late in the day, but always with a joke and a promise that next year, he'd come visit in person. This year, I woke up to silence. No call. No text. Not even one of those automatic e-cards that sing you a song you didn't ask for. I stared at the phone like it might ring if I just held it the right way. I refreshed the email more times than I'd like to admit. I told myself, they're busy. They have kids. Work. Lives. But deep down, I knew. You see, people don't forget calendars. They forget people. And when the day passed with nothing but the ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the old house settling into itself, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even cry. I just felt small. Like I'd slowly faded into the background of their lives, a picture on a shelf they walked past every day but no longer stopped to look at. So, I made myself a cup of tea. I lit a candle. I sat by the window and whispered happy birthday to myself. Because if no one else remembered, I still had to. I still mattered, even if just to me. That night, I placed the phone back on the charger and realized, sometimes, the hardest part of growing old isn't what you lose, but what slowly forgets you exist. And in that quiet, I promised myself something. Next year, even if the phone never rings, I will still celebrate. Not because someone remembered me, but because I am still here. There's a certain kind of silence in a doctor's office waiting room. It's not just the hush of a television playing an old news channel no one's watching, or the crinkling of magazines whose covers are months out of date. It's the silence of people carrying something they don't have words for. I sat there on a Thursday morning. The kind of gray, overcast day where the sky just hangs low and heavy. My hands rested on my lap, fingers curling and uncurling without thought. Across from me sat a couple. She leaned into him, his arm draped casually around her shoulder, as if the weight of the world didn't rest inside that building. I remember thinking, that used to be us. When Richard and I used to come here, we'd always make jokes in the car about getting old, how our bodies had become calendars of appointments and reminders. But we'd go together. We were a team. His presence made the fluorescent lights less cold, the forms less intimidating, the diagnoses less terrifying. Now, I sign in alone. Sit alone. Wait alone. A nurse called a name. It wasn't mine. The couple stood. He helped her up, gently, and I watched the way their hands met midair, automatically, naturally, like breathing. My eyes burned. I looked down, not wanting to intrude on their moment, but also not wanting to face my own reflection in the polished tile floor. That's when I realized something painful. Loneliness isn't just about being alone in your house. Sometimes, it's feeling invisible in public places where people are still living life side by side. I don't remember much from the appointment that day. I remember nodding, smiling politely, asking the right questions. But emotionally? I was elsewhere. I was holding Richard's hand again, pretending I was brave. Afterward, I stepped out into the parking lot and stood still for a moment. Cars passed, people moved around me, but it felt like I wasn't really there. Like I was a ghost of someone who once had a partner, someone who once belonged in a pair. I drove home without turning the radio on. The silence followed me, settled beside me like an old friend I never invited in. They say you should never eat alone. Not because it's unhealthy or impolite, but because there's a certain kind of ache that settles in your chest when a meal meant for two becomes a ritual for one. I never realized how loud the clink of a fork could be, or how hollow a kitchen sounds without another voice cutting through the silence. The first few weeks after Richard passed, I still cooked like he was coming home. Muscle memory, I guess. I'd make his favorite stew, slice 2 pieces of bread, pour 2 glasses of water. I'd even set his napkin just the way he liked, folded once, diagonally, tucked beside the plate. And then I'd sit there, staring at the full plate across from me like it might magically fill with warmth, with laughter, with him. But it never did. Over time, the meals got simpler. A bowl of cereal, toast and tea, a can of soup. It wasn't about nutrition anymore, it was about avoiding the reminder. The reminder that love once sat across from me, eyes twinkling as he told stories I'd heard 100 times but never tired of. Now, there's no clinking of his spoon against the bowl. No sigh after the first bite. No hands reaching out across the table for mine. Just me. And the soft hum of the refrigerator. I tried turning on the TV once, just to have some noise. But even the voices of strangers couldn't fill the silence that used to be filled with a familiar laugh. So I let the quiet stay. It became a kind of companion. Not welcome, but patient. Sometimes, I talk out loud. Ask him how his day was. Tell him mine. I know it sounds strange, but it's less strange than pretending I'm okay eating alone every night. What I've learned is this: grief isn't just in the tears. It's in the routine. In the knife you only use once. In the chair that never moves. In the leftovers that last too long. Loneliness is loudest when it shows up in the ordinary. But even so, I still set the table for 2 on Sundays. Just once a week. Just to remember. because forgetting would hurt more. And in those quiet meals, I don't feel completely alone. I feel like I'm honoring something. Someone. A life that was shared. A love that still lingers, even if the seat across from me stays empty. It started like any other day. The sun crept in through the curtains just the way it always did, warm, unbothered, unaware. I got up slowly, made my tea, and sat by the window with my robe still wrapped around me, hoping, no, expecting something. A call. A card. A knock on the door. Anything. It was my birthday. Not a big one, not a milestone. Just another number added to the long string of years. But still, it mattered to me. It used to matter to others, too. I remember how Richard would always forget the exact number, but never the date. He'd bring home flowers from the market. Sometimes he'd get the color wrong, but it was always with a sheepish grin and a slice of chocolate cake in a box. The kids would call, sometimes sing off-key and too fast, but it was sweet. It was enough. But this year? Nothing. The clock moved past noon. Then past 5. By the time evening came and the house was swallowed in golden dusk, I realized no one had called. No message. No post. Not even one of those auto-generated texts. I sat there, staring at my own reflection in the darkening window. I whispered, "Happy birthday," to myself. It felt silly. It felt heartbreaking. The worst part wasn't the forgetting. It was the quiet question it left behind: do I still matter? Maybe everyone thought someone else had remembered. Maybe they were busy. Maybe I had fallen off the list of reminders in their phones. Or maybe, slowly and silently, I had become background noise in their lives. Not absent, but not present either. I baked myself a tiny cupcake that night. Just one. Lit a single candle. Sang a line and laughed, then cried. I didn't even bother making a wish. What would I wish for? That time would reverse? That voices I missed would come back? That I would stop feeling so invisible? But then, I blew out the candle anyway. Not because I believed in wishes, but because it reminded me that I still had breath. I was still here. I still counted. Loneliness doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it's just the silence of a birthday that no one remembers. The unopened mailbox. The phone that doesn't ring. The plate set for one on a day that used to feel special. And yet, even through the ache, I told myself something important: I can remember me. I can light my own candle. I can celebrate surviving another year. I can choose to be visible to myself even if the world forgets for a moment. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting that same pale glow hospitals always seem to have, neither warm nor cold, just blank. The chairs were stiff, arranged in neat rows, all facing nothing. Magazines from last year sat untouched on the table, curling at the edges. A television murmured in the corner, playing a show no one was really watching. I sat there, hands folded, coat still clinging to my shoulders. It was just a checkup, a routine scan. Nothing serious, they said. But it wasn't the appointment that filled me with dread. It was the silence that wrapped around me in that room. That waiting. That remembering. I glanced to my left. An older woman gently squeezed her husband's hand, whispering reassurances. To my right, a man paced nervously while his daughter, barely 5, clung to his pant leg. People came in pairs. In groups. In whispers. I sat alone. I realized then that hospitals are where loneliness hits hardest. Not because of fear, but because of contrast. In a place designed to heal, you notice the spaces where connection used to be. The seat beside me, once occupied by Richard, was now just that, a seat. Empty. Still. Unremarkable to everyone else, but screaming to me. I thought about the times we came here together. The way he'd joke about the bad coffee. How he'd insist on carrying my bag, even when he wasn't the one with the appointment. He had a way of making sterile places feel soft. He made waiting bearable. Now. I stared at the clock. It didn't move any slower than usual. But without him, each second was louder. Sharper. The nurse finally called my name. I stood up, smiled politely, followed her down the hallway. But inside, a piece of me lingered in that waiting room, quiet, invisible, holding space for a hand I no longer had to hold. Grief doesn't always come crashing down. Sometimes it shows up in ordinary moments, like a hospital waiting room, where no one is crying, where no tragedy has struck. Just a woman sitting alone, realizing how profoundly she misses being waited with, being seen, being accompanied. That day, I learned something: loneliness doesn't mean having no one to talk to. It means having something to say, and no one to say it to. And yet, even in that emptiness, I found a kind of quiet strength. I got up. I walked forward. Not because I was okay, but because I was still trying. Still showing up. Still hoping that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would feel a little less hollow. It was a quiet Sunday morning when it happened, not with a dramatic revelation, not with tears or thunderous thoughts, but with something as simple as a mirror. I had just made a cup of tea, the way Richard used to do it, extra honey, 2 lemon slices. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring in through the lace curtains, painting soft shadows on the wooden floor. Everything was still. No ticking clock. No phone ringing. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the warmth of the mug in my hands. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Hair a little messier than usual. Lines around my eyes a little deeper. A robe that had seen better days. I looked tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from carrying memories like stones in my pockets. From waking up every day wondering if I mattered to anyone anymore. From forgetting what it felt like to matter to me. And that's when it struck me, not like a bolt of lightning, but like a whisper I had ignored for too long. I had stopped loving myself. I had spent so much time grieving who I'd lost, I forgot to tend to the one person who was still here. Me. I had poured so much of myself into loving others, into caregiving and remembering, that I'd forgotten how to care for my own heart. How to nurture my own soul. So I got up. Walked to the bathroom. Washed my face with warm water. I looked into that same mirror, and instead of seeing someone broken or forgotten, I chose to see someone still becoming. I didn't need to be young again. I didn't need to be surrounded by people to feel whole. What I needed was to forgive myself for the regrets, for the silence, for the lonely nights when I wished I could disappear, and to gently remind myself that I'm still worthy of joy, of care, of softness. That day, I wrote a letter to myself. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. Dear me. You've survived storms and heartbreaks. You've loved deeply, lost deeply, and still, you're here. That means something. Don't forget to love the woman who stayed. I taped it to the fridge. I still see it every morning. Sometimes I whisper it to myself over tea. Loving yourself again doesn't mean forgetting the ones you lost. It means honoring them by choosing to live gently, quietly, but fully. It means allowing joy to return in small doses, in the smell of lavender, in the taste of warm bread, in a walk around the block where the flowers bloom just for you. I'm not the woman I was before I lost him. I'll never be. But I am still someone. Still learning. Still trying. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough. If this story touched something in you, I invite you to gently tap that like button, share it with someone who might need it today, and subscribe to the channel. We're building a quiet little place here, for healing, for honesty, and for hearts learning how to beat again. You're never alone here.